Capital is like oxygen. Try to live without it. That's how Everett Sands frames the stakes for small businesses. It's a useful frame for what we get into in today's episode. Everett is the founder and CEO of Lendistry, a mission-driven capital deployer that's become one of the most active partners to small businesses in the country. They work with Goldman Sachs, Amazon, Visa, and Walmart, and most recently helped deploy disaster recovery funds in the wake of the LA wildfires. Over the last few years, Lendistry has also done something that might not look obvious for a CDFI-aligned lender. They've gone deep into women's sports: the LA Sparks, Gotham FC, the Chicago Sky, the Atlanta Dream. In this conversation, Caroline sits down with Everett to unpack the strategy behind those partnerships. Everett compares the WNBA today to Formula One before Drive to Survive. He breaks down how Lendistry uses data, down to the hour a small business owner is uploading loan documents at night after kids are in bed to decide where to show up. And he makes the case for why women's sports isn't a marketing checkbox. It's a thesis. One built on $85 trillion in baby boomer wealth set to transfer, 70% of which is projected to land with women. And on the conviction that you go where the puck is going. For the Roar podcast, where sports, real estate, and revenue converge, this interview hits a vein we don't always cover directly: the financing layer that makes sports and entertainment districts actually accessible to the businesses they're supposed to serve. Everett gets into how mixed-use developments around stadiums and arenas can be designed so independent operators can compete inside them, not just exist beside them. There's also a lot in here on leadership, on how the short window for athletes have to build long-term wealth. I'm Bryce Clinton, and this is the Roar Podcast.
Welcome to the Roar Podcast. I'm your host, Caroline Valvardi, and with me today is Everett Sands, founder and CEO of Lendistry. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Caroline. Happy to be here.
Great. Likewise, super excited to have you on the show to kind of talk about a little bit different angle than maybe what some of the listeners are used to with the Roar Podcast. So we can jump right in with one of the questions that we typically kind of start with. So can you tell us a bit about your career journey and how you ended up where you are now?
Yeah, so I started in DC, where I'm from, and went to boarding school in New Hampshire, ended up going to Penn in Philadelphia, and really got fascinated with finance and with money, and partly because I didn't have it, and partly because it just seemed like that's what made the world go around. Ended up working for a couple of different banks, one a minority bank, one a large national player, and then founded Lendistry because I saw, I'll just say, the landscape changing in terms of access to capital. Not to get too much in the weeds, but there was a moment after the great financial crisis where banks were allowed to say what was operationally efficient. And the way to think about that is every business says, hey, this client is too large, too small, different things like that. But when the banking industry or the financial sector starts to say that, that's a little bit dangerous, because we've always told people have good credit, have good income, you can get a loan. If you were to have an 800 credit score and you'd have great income, but you walked into a bank and they didn't offer that loan amount, that could be fairly discouraging. And so Lendistry was started to help solve for that problem. One, to support the banks in terms of their operational efficiency, and two, to help the communities in terms of lending. But the answer to your question is through a variety of different financial institutions, and being a nerd about access to capital and finance brought me to where I'm at today.
Amazing. Thank you. And so, the connection to sports, we'll get there, is, I think, super powerful and fascinating, and why I wanted to bring you on the show. But before we jump in, can you just talk a little bit, just to give kind of grounding for the audience, of what does Lendistry do?
Sure. So Lendistry, we have roughly about 300 team members, 6 offices across the U.S. We're a capital deployer. So we partner with banks and financial institutions, so think of insurance companies and non-bank lenders, to deploy capital. We partner with governments to deploy capital, and then we partner with Fortune 500s. So to give you some examples, there's programs like Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business, 10,000 Women. Goldman Sachs is an investment bank. So that business might come to Goldman and say, hey, I just learned XYZ at 10,000 Small Business, and I'd like to borrow $1 million. Well, Lendistry is one of their partners. And you might come to us, or you'd have an opportunity to come to us to be able to borrow that million or 100,000 or some other number. Let's say the government wants to deploy money. So a lot of times what's a little bit more familiar to us is disaster recovery. So I'll bring up a recent one, LA wildfires. We supported the county of Los Angeles in terms of distributing grants to those who had lost their home. We also supported the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce that wanted to support small businesses that lost their business or their businesses were impacted by the fire. And then when you think about Fortune 500s, we have partners like Visa, we have partners like Amazon, we have partners like Walmart. So if you get a package to your home that is a small business likely delivering you that package, well, that business needs access to capital. And we built Amazon Community Lending to support some of the small businesses on Amazon's seller network.
Awesome. Cool. And now is where we kind of take it into the shift of how does this all connect to women's sports? So Lendistry has made some notable moves in women's sports partnerships over the, I don't know, you can tell us however many years, but something I was following very closely, just seeing this opportunity to connect more the sports and community development and small business, all of those kind of elements. And so can you just walk us through how those partnerships came about or kind of where the origins of why partnering with in women's sports?
Yeah, sure. So every decision we make when it comes to marketing, it's part mission and part business. We'll go mission first and then we'll go into the business because probably we can get carried away in the business side of it. But the mission is because we help underserved communities and because we're trying to think about how to provide access to capital, the numbers are a little daunting, but as you can imagine, women are not getting the access to capital that comparable to men. And so when we look at that in totality, and you can insert any type of capital, VC capital, private credit, SBA loans, whatever you want to do, look at as a category, we feel like we could be part of the solution to that. When we think about being part of the solution in terms of access to capital, we also have to think about, are we part of the problem? So where are we spending our marketing dollars? Where are we spending our resources? Where are we having our company outings? And so that is where the WNBA and also women's soccer came into play, where we started to say, okay, we need to think about this with a little bit more intentionality. And then the last part of the mission, maybe not the last, but one of the other major parts is equal pay and other things, right? So somewhat cyclical, right? If you want to loan someone money, then you got to make sure they can pay you back. And to help them pay you back, you spend the money, right? And then it comes full circle because if we spend the money, hopefully we can become a trailblazer leader for other institutions to spend the money. And then revenue grows. And when revenue grows, compensation grows and everything else along with it. That's the mission side of it. So on the business side, when we started to think about women's sports, we really started to pay attention to a couple of different factors. One, probably the most obvious, which is the popularity of the players. So whether that be their social media views, the amount of context they have, different things like that. Two, we started to pay attention to the business overall. Where was it going? So this could be everything from the valuations of the WNBA teams to the TV deals, different things like that. And then three, we started to pay attention to other market forces. So the way I tend to think of, if you take the WNBA for an example, I would equate it to Formula One before the Netflix Drive to Survive special. And if you actually pay attention to, Formula One, what happened after Drive to Survive, it really went through the roof. And I think the same thing is happening and will happen. I think we'll look back 5, 10 years from now at the WNBA. And I think not us, but a lot of companies are going to say, should have, would have, could have. And, it'll be what it is.
Yes. Yeah, there's so many elements of that that are, are so interesting. And I mean, one, I think just the parallels of women's sports, and we talk about underinvested communities. It's that, switching the mindset from philanthropy and charity to investment that, these, people are worth investing in. It's, I think it kind of reframes the whole thing. And a lot of times in sports, it's, there's a lot of talk about community impact, but it's often this kind of more philanthropic, charitable mindset. And there's just this whole world of, looking at it more as an investment that I think is so much more powerful and creates real change that is good for everyone. So yeah, it's cool to hear about that. And can you talk about, where was the origins of like your first partnership in women's sports? And because now you have a bunch, so if you can just talk through some of them, and yeah, is that something that you came up with or the team, or, how did you go about kind of thinking
I wish I was that smart. No, my genius is in hiring the smart people to figure this type of stuff out. But it started with the LA Sparks. We wanted to start at home for a variety of different reasons. One, it allowed us to be more present. Two, when we started to think about, call it the development of the partnership, whether we needed to show up in a high quality way, whether we need to think about the businesses that we were going to represent or present at the halftime shows or different things like that, and just really connecting with the organization, the Sparks organization. We wanted it to be fairly close. So from the office that I sit in and some of the senior leaders sit in, literally the LA Live is about 2 miles away. So we were like, okay, this is going to be close. We can learn a lot. And then, as you can imagine, it started to develop from there. Second partnership was FC Gotham. And that was really a couple of different things. One, similar to the WNBA, we had started studying the numbers of FIFA, and I'm going to mess the stat up. So please put the asterisk or whatever you need to do. But I think 5 million people watched the Super Bowl, and I think it's 500 million people watched the World Cup championship. So it's because it's worldly, obviously. So, and when you start to think about that 100x or 10x or whatever the number is, again, taking back that investment mindset, you start to say, where are the places that we want to be? I'll mix that a little bit in some more business. Majority of transactions happen within 6 states: New York, Georgia, Florida, Illinois, Texas, and California. So we started to map out, where do we want our strategic partnerships? Not that we won't partner in other states, we obviously do, but we really wanted to be very intentional as we started to think about our kind of first partnerships. And so FC Gotham was just amazing because they actually won the soccer championship the first year we were partners. So whether it be their version of the terrible towel or just being in that New York, New Jersey, market, which is an amazing market, it just had a lot of benefits for us. So hopefully that answers your question. But
Yes.
yeah.
All right, so now transitioning a bit, Surge, we're focused on developing and investing in large-scale sports and entertainment districts around stadiums and arenas. And so that's, all different types of mixes of uses. So it's hospitality, housing, retail, all of these things. And there's so many opportunities, for new businesses to come in. But of course, when you're building these sports and entertainment districts, it's not always easy for smaller independent businesses and historically financially underserved businesses to take advantage of those opportunities. And so can you talk a little bit about, I don't know, advice that you would give as sports teams and other partners are planning out these districts and ways to make them more inclusive and making sure there's more equitable economic opportunity for, small businesses and local businesses that are already existing kind of in those areas to be able to benefit?
Sure. So I'll start from the perspective of the business, and then I'll come to, kind of the larger institution like a surgeon, how you can help. So the perspective of the business should be the most successful generally businesses, not by size and not necessarily by revenue, but just in terms of percentage of success, are franchises. And the reason why they're successful are, one, there's a blueprint, and two, they're attached to what we call an anchor institution. So if you were to buy a franchise, generally there's a big name attached to it or something like that. I think the small business should think about it as they get that benefit of being attached to the anchor institution. And so what does that mean? That means there's already customer flow, so less marketing needs to be done. There's already an attachment to a sports team, so you can really kind of calendar, whether it be your events, your happy hours, or different things like that. And then I think the third thing is that you're already attached to something that the local municipality, city, whatever, cares about, right? And I think that's really, really important because now you have the people, you've got the government, and then again, you've got one of your largest expenses in terms of marketing kind of covered for you. Now, moving over to the larger sports development, companies, et cetera, I think they should do a couple of different things. One, they should recognize that they're going to have this small business that's going to want to participate in the transaction. And so whether they think about things like tax credits, whether they think about discounted rent, whether they think about other opportunities that they might get as part of a what I call a government solicitation exercise. So whether that be from the bonding to obviously the financial structuring, I think they should consider those small businesses. And we've seen things like this. We've seen businesses get a discount or a grant. We've seen them get a variety of different things in an effort to ramp up, insert 2 years, 3 years, or however long it might take them to get started. Discounted rent is a tricky thing, but one of the things that we've seen be successful is a revenue play versus a rent play. And so what does that mean? That means as opposed to saying, look, there's this fixed cost that you're going to have as this new business owner, I'm going to give you a variable, I'm going to give you a fixed cost. So there's some portion that's rent, but I'm also going to attach myself to the variable cost of the institution. Said differently, if you do well, we do well. And if you have a, kind of a slower time frame or day, then we have a slower time frame or day. But there's a way to kind of make all those numbers work. I hope that makes sense. But we've seen this play out in our airport concessions business, some of our other sports businesses, and a variety of different organizations kind of across the US. It's a play on the franchise model. And so that's why I started with.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And then going back a bit to some of the women's sports partnerships. So this is the Roar podcast. And so Roar is our data platform. And so we acquired a company called Roar a few months back, led by Adam Grossman. And so that's kind of collecting all of these data sets, customer data sets from all over the place, and fan data sets from teams. And as we think about districts, that's not just the fan data, that's much broader, the people that are going to be living, working, and playing there. And so obviously Lendistry is very innovative in your, use of AI and data and all these things. So feel free to weave that in. But when we think specifically about partnerships, and we actually had the Chicago Sky on the podcast, I think last week. And so that's, I think, one of your more recent partners, and just talked about using data to how do you establish partners and pick partners. So can you talk from your perspective of, how do you evaluate which teams that you've worked with so far, like how do you, evaluate, and, do you have other targets of you're going to continue across, all of the WNBA or NWSL, or, the ambitions beyond that. But yeah, a little bit about how you use data to kind of evaluate
Yeah.
partnerships and things.
So I'll start backwards. I mean, yes, the game plan is to take on as many partnerships as we can, both in terms of being able to be present, as well as obviously the economics associated with it. So the data says that she's running her business from 9 to 5. She's taking care of her home from 5 to 9. And then she's applying for loans or doing things that are related to the business generally later in the evening. And how are we doing? How do we know that? Because we're tracking when she applies, when she's uploading documents, when she's communicating with us. So then when you start to kind of think about that, and you start to think of what is the approach that you want for that customer, this is not, hey, the office is open, come in at midnight. This is a much more soft sell, non-transactional moment that we need to embrace and we need to find ourselves in. So what is a soft sell, non-transactional moment? It's meeting her where she's at, where she's kind of most comfortable. And believe it or not, those sports games are a portion of that. Now, there's literally the actual game she's going to. There's whether or not she's watching Ion or ESPN or something else in terms of, kind of how she's receiving that information. But the punchline is what we're trying to do is we're trying to essentially say Lendistry is a brand that you recognize, that is where you are, and that, when we go to the finance side, is obviously a responsible deployer of capital. And so though we're leveraging the data to say, okay, when is she transacting? What's happening when she's transacting, right? What could possibly be in the background? Like, what could she be listening to, watching? What else could she be doing? Where is she showing up? Whether that be a family exercise, non-family exercise, a business exercise, anything like that. And then how do we have that soft sell? And then to go further into the data, where is that happening? And so that's why we created a partnership with the Chicago Sky and the Atlanta Dream this year. Because again, as we start to build this out, very clear that she's in major metropolitan markets. So insert, again, Los Angeles, New York, New Jersey, New York City, and Northern New Jersey, as well as obviously Atlanta and Chicago. And then there's tangents to that too. So another tangent is we are in the capital business as well. Some of the math shows 85 trillion in the baby boomers. 70% of that 85 trillion will go to women. The obvious stat is women live longer than men. And so she will inherit that capital. And when you start to look at what she cares about in terms of investing, impact investing becomes kind of top of mind. You can see this in several of what I would call, whether they be billionaires or 100 millionaires or millionaires, and where they're spending their money. So we're tracking all different types of things. And if you get into that investor's mind, if she does care about impact, then obviously she's going to care about women-owned small businesses. The last stat I'll tell you, you probably know this already, which is that women are creating more businesses than men over the last couple of years. And so naturally, you kind of want to, to use a sports analogy, you want to go to where the puck is going, so to speak. So if you know that women are about to be the largest segment of investors, if you know that they're about to be the largest segment of business owners, you don't want to start, 5 years from now. You want to start now so that you can either capture the data, build a brand, or all the different things that are important to a business like ours that wants to be able to, deploy that capital.
Yeah, and I think also the other kind of alignment with all this, which is really interesting, is just the athletes themselves and the players, and how, I mean, on the men's side too, but particularly for women, the shorter season and all that have, really been kind of almost forced to be very entrepreneurial thinking. And there are so many cool stories of the athletes, WNBA, NWSL, all of them really, being so entrepreneurial and, but also need access to capital. So yeah, I just think the alignment is so strong and powerful in what you guys are doing. And,
Yeah, well, if you just kind of double click on that, there's a couple of things to think about. One, it doesn't matter gender. Like athletes' career is very short, so you get this large sum of capital, and then you have to live in, I don't know, 30 to 50 years after it, right? So you better invest or think about investing like immediately, literally, right? And obviously with NIL, some of that money is coming a little bit earlier, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is if you take something like what's happening with the new recent CBA agreement, and shout out to the WNBA and their governing board that were able to work that through with the Players Association. But there's going to be a lot of athletes that are going to make a big chunk of money, and whether it be the lottery, or whether it be that transition from kind of college to pro, maybe now high school to college, or NIL is probably disrupting that a little bit. But the punchline is, if you start making 4x or 5x the amount of money, again, you need to very quickly think about where that money's going to go to build sustainability and investments. And then to the other point that you made, they have this brand power, whether it be their followers, whether it be, what their interests are, whether it be just the respect that they have in the community. How are they going to leverage that, beyond, the pro sports? And so business is an easy way, I think, to think about how to leverage that, whether they're an investor and they're leveraging their brand to support that investment, or they're the actual business owner. And then we're like oxygen, like capital. There's no like try to live without capital. You might as well just like not try to live without oxygen, right? Especially to a business. And so when you can kind of get all those things right and combine those things together, then you really see the athletes and quite frankly, the professionals who, live abundant lives kind of post pro sports and even post their career. So we hope that we can play a role in that while, the athletes are kind of going through that transitional moment of making a lot of money, figuring out what to do with it, how to invest, and then obviously living beyond the pro career.
Yep. Yeah, and then the other piece of it too, just the trend towards the kind of impact investing side of it too has been kind of cool and interesting to see, and is really where I realized just this huge intersection between sports and community development and kind of the mission-driven finance, and just where all those can really, yeah, just drive a lot of impact. I mean, we talk about the sports and entertainment districts. Back to that, I mean, I feel like mission-driven financial institutions are such a powerful kind of partnership as we think about these very large scale kind of centrally real estate developments and all the different components. And as we talked about before, just making them, the economic opportunities accessible and all that. But I wanted to ask, as we've talked about a lot about what Lendistry does and all the things behind it. But can you talk about some? I don't know if you're probably not able to share favorite businesses or stories, but if you can just give some kind of flavor, real feel, or maybe some of the businesses that have been featured through some of these partnerships, just to kind of give people just that really, human element of who these people are, what some of these businesses do. Would love to hear, yeah, a bit about, yeah, just highlights of a few, or where they're based and what they do.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, just to take a step back. So what we do is we give businesses an opportunity to compete in contests. These are local contests where they effectively, put their name in the hat, for lack of a better term. And then, winners are chosen on a variety of different things. Some are chosen by us, some are chosen by their teams. We give businesses an opportunity to show up generally outside the stadium. So for example, at FC Gotham, we did a food truck night. Some food truck vendors were there. They were outside of the stadium. They were serving food. The fans came a couple hours earlier. They had a lot of different, a lot of other sponsors there too. So imagine everything from games to food to, other things that they could participate in pre-game. And then sometimes we're actually leveraging the vendors to support in terms of some of the paraphernalia that we're associated with the teams and different things like that. So a lot of different ways that businesses participate. But specifically going to the answer to your question, we've had a variety of different businesses. I'll just give you a couple highlights. So one was actually a pie company and started making pies and kind of took it to the next level kind of post the pandemic. And this is just because of the growth in e-commerce and different things like that. Ended up in Whole Foods and now is like one of the biggest distributors of pies kind of in the market, right? But she happened to win. She happened to be in front of the Sparks and really got to, talk about her business. Another was a pet place. So this is kind of this is a pet farm. This is LA Wildfire. And, so think of everything from saving the animals to then being a place where people who are in kind of a distressed moment can kind of take a step back, and animals have a way of kind of, you know, calming us down and cleansing us and helping us to kind of return to norm. And then kind of everything in between. I mean, we've had literally those who are beauticians and stylists that have come forward. We've had those who are involved in weddings, and whether that be like making the dress or different things like that. So a variety of different winners all across the board have been able to just, you know, have that moment. And I think what's important for both the players to know and the community to know is these are also businesses that might be looking for investments. These are businesses that might be looking to grow. And, you know, one of the things we encourage some of the players to do is you don't always have to run the business just because you like that product or you like that industry. You could actually become an investor or an influencer or other things. So that there's so many things that are out there, and we're trying to connect those dots on both sides. One, the business owners, sometimes they're so far head down, they don't think about marketing, right? Or they're not able to market. Maybe they can't afford it. So you got different factors there. And then on the other side, the players get to say, okay, I see this business, I have this interest. Maybe I'll try to dig a little bit deeper into that immediately or kind of post career. So again, trying to have that soft kind of non-transactional moment for everybody, and the stadiums and the audiences and the followers are a great way to do it.
Awesome. And so somewhat, I guess, along that vein, I mean, what has brought you the most joy in your career? And can be sports related or not, but ideally, yeah, something related to kind of the women's sports partnerships. But yeah, would love to hear. Yeah, just kind
I
of
mean, it's priceless to see one of those businesses present at halftime or, you know, during one of the commercial breaks. I mean, they are so excited. So it brings me back to like, I mean, Lendistry is a small, big business, right? We're not as scrappy as we used to be. We need to get scrappier, but you know, it's just great. Like that moment, I don't know. It's like, I guess your kid opening a holiday gift or, you know, a present or something. I don't know, but there's just something about the purity of it mixed with the excitement, mixed with like the, you know, seeing their name in the lights. You know, I remember the first time our name was in the lights. So I think that's pretty exciting. I think the other thing I can't deny is seeing the Lendistry logo on like Sports Center or you know, on someone's Instagram clip. I mean, that just, you know, that's beyond my wildest dreams. So I feel like I'm that kid now all of a sudden opening a
well,
present.
I mean, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, you're entrepreneur and founder of Lendistry yourself. I remember first maybe it was the CFI Coalition event or something that you spoke at, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh wow, that's yeah, super cool just to hear your story. And that was probably 2019 or something like that. I think when
Yeah.
I started at
Yeah. And,
Lendistry.
and as you can also imagine, doing something like showing your peers in the CDFI industry, which just for your audience is, you know, kind of a group of non-bank lenders, about 1,400 of them across the US that focus on responsible lending and access to capital, you know, showing them a different path too, right? It's like, and I respect obviously all the different things that we do. It's just at Lendistry, we decided that sports was a path we wanted to take. And so I like when I get calls from other organizations saying, you know, why'd you guys do that? Or tell me more about it. And I think that's great.
All right, I do. And then I want to jump into a bit of you having started Lendistry, and I just have been fascinated over my own career, just kind of looking at leadership and within my, my own positions that I've had and becoming a leader myself and, out in the world, what leadership looks like. So I would love to hear from you just what you prioritize as a leader and have seen be effective or not so effective. But yeah, if you could just talk a bit about that, because that at the end of the day is what makes the world go for better or for worse and makes these things
Yeah.
successful or not. So especially business or small business. So
I think you have to have a North Star and you have to be very focused on the North Star every day. So for me, it's helping small businesses, which is might come across a little strange because Lendistry actually has a mortgage company and we have an insurance company and different things like that. But I connect all the dots together. So sometimes people will say, well, why'd you create the mortgage company? And I'm like, well, I can give the small business the best loan, the best business loan in the world. But if they come home and there's disruption, financial disruption because they got a bad mortgage, guess what? My business loan is at risk, so to speak, right? When we started thinking about insurance and how people care about themselves, there's some stats out there about funeral expenses and how disruptive it is to underserved communities. So, getting a term policy and having access to knowing where to get it is just as important as insurance companies being leveraged for capital market structures and different things like that. So, I think the first answer to your question is having that North Star. And then having everything involved in the day, literally every day, being related to the North Star. So that means choosing the right leaders. I try my best to choose leaders that are smarter than me. I try to choose people that could replace me if necessary. And it might not necessarily be replacing in the company. That's kind of the obvious one, but replacing in the subject matter expertise might be the little less obvious. I think the second thing is really trying to think about how to be transformative, like how to get the word out. And then, as we talked about already in the conversation, how to leverage data and technology. I think technology is a great equalizer. I've been very, very focused on that. And the data is what brought me there, right? The data has said to me, like, okay, like, how do you meet this customer where they're at? Like, whether it be on their phone, whether it be, they're applying for loans at 11 o'clock or midnight at night. Like, how do you make these things easier? Access to capital has been fairly elusive for a long time, and that kind of perturbs me. If I'm just being honest with you, it's kind of like annoying. Like, why can't we solve this? Like, why is it such a big problem? And so the last thing I'll just say is that I'm very competitive, right? So that's my own kind of sports upbringing, and so this access to capital is kind of like a sport for me that I feel like I got to conquer. So I think it's the North Star and having that, like, what gives you that edge, or what kind of somewhere between pisses you off and like get you sparked.
Yep.
I think you need that.
Yeah. No, I love that because everyone has that drive to do something. So might as well
Yeah.
use it for something, positive.
Yeah.
No, that's great. All right. Well, we can close on that. I think we have covered quite a number of topics here, and I, super appreciate you coming on the show and talking about all the women's partnerships and alignment with, equitable access to capital and all of these really powerful things that I think can be infused much more kind of across the sports world. And thank you for, setting kind of the example and way to do these things. So super excited to see you guys continued trajectory. So thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.